Hello, my fine friends, and welcome to episode 6 of the Destination Discourse. Wait, is it 6, Adam, or 7? I've lost count. There's a lot. This is Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, joined today with Adam Stoker.
Hey everybody, and I can't remember if it's episode 6 or 7 either because we got a few episodes banked, and I know we've published 3 at this point.
Yeah, it's episode greater than 5. How about that? We know it's definitely that. and, and we're
Is
joined
this the
today with,
Halloween spooktacular, by the way?
well, yeah, it could be. We are recording during Halloween season, but this will go out after Halloween, so we can confuse the viewers. That's the problem of not recording these and publishing them live. We're gonna have to fix that in the new year. Let me introduce our guest today, special guest today. Good friend of mine. We've been working together for a couple of years now on all kinds of crazy projects. C.A. Clark, you want to introduce yourself and tell our audience why the heck they should listen to you today?
Sounds great. Thank you, Stuart, and glad to be on the show. I am C.A. Clark. I am with a company called Miles Partnership, which is a strategic marketing agency with a focus on travel and tourism. I lead our AI initiatives internally at Miles, and I also facilitate a program called AI Opener for destinations with a partner in Europe called Group Now. And since January of this year, we have been doing a kind of deep dive exploration of how AI tech affects destinations, visitors, the kinds of jobs that we do, the marketing that we do, all kinds of those aspects. And that's what I'm looking forward to talking about today.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
CA, were you banished to New Zealand? Did you proactively go to New Zealand? What is it that
So
led you there?
Well, this is actually a really common New Zealand story. So we've had an office here for about 15 years. We do mostly strategic kind of like consultative research and things like that down in this part of the world. Um, and I had come down here a couple of times and kind of worked out of the office. And then in 2019, I had this crazy idea where I was going to bring the family down and we were going to live here for 10 months and then go back. And then I don't know if you remember this or not, because it was a long time ago, but there's like this weird pandemic thing that happened
Huh.
kind of right in the middle of that. And I kept just not going back. And then, one day I turned around and I lived here. So that's actually a real common New Zealand story, right? You hear that a lot. I came down here for a summer 20 years ago. So yeah, that's how I ended up
And you
here.
got stuck. And it's not the easiest place to get to stay, right? That you have to meet certain requirements if you want to move there. At least that's what they tell people.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I've been working on that. That's taken quite a long time
So you tricked
as
them,
well.
is what you're
But
basically saying, to allow you to
yeah,
stay.
yeah,
Or maybe it was your wife that allowed
yeah,
you your family to stay because
yeah. Don't hopefully they don't watch this, right? They'll find out I don't belong
that's
here.
fair. So
Someday.
this is the first international episode. So we got CA is in New Zealand today, and Adam, you're not in the US. Well, you're in the US, but not the continental US today.
That's right. I'm in Puerto Rico at Advocacy Summit for DI.
Yeah, how's it going?
Great. I think there's a few people that have gone to the beach already, to be
Yeah,
perfectly fair, but I can't
yeah.
necessarily blame them here in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean that's what you do, right? People when they come to conferences in Myrtle Beach do the same thing, so we cannot blame them. I couldn't swing advocacy this year. We sent one of our folks from our team, but I'm glad you're having a great time. Maybe future episode we'll do a recap or get someone from the organization on to talk about it. But today we're going to be talking about ethics. And a lot of us we've already done episodes on AI in this show, but we wanted to be real specific today and talk about a niche subject, which is one that's coming up more and more, and that's the ethics of AI. Is it ethical to use AI for marketing purposes, especially for destination marketing purposes? That's what we're going to be talking about today. But hold on to your hats before any of that happens. It's the soon-to-be award-winning, the greatest segment in all of entertainment. It is Stu's News. And there's no jingle yet. You still haven't gotten the likes, Adam. But we are
Yeah,
doing a
I'm working
twist
on it.
today. We're going to do a twist today. This isn't actually Stu's news today. This is going to be Adam's news today. But I'm still going to share it. So let me share my screen real quick, and then we'll set it up. So Adam sent
Great.
me this message a couple of weeks ago, or about a week or so ago, on LinkedIn. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So you sent me this screenshot on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. It was right after Hurricane Helene, and it was from, this, to be fair, this is not a DMO, but it was from Glenwood South District, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they sent this out as a promoted post on Instagram. This is a sponsored ad. And Adam, you want to tell me why you sent this to me? First, do you want to read what it says to the folks listening, and then do you want to tell me what triggered you to send it to me?
Yeah. So, and to be fair, I want to give credit where credit's due. There's a colleague of mine named Craig Carter, who I've met along the way, and he shared this on LinkedIn and said, "What were you thinking?" And the post says, "We're sorry, Helene, it wasn't meant to be," which is a reference to Hurricane Helene. And, this was right in the middle. I'm looking for the date on this thing, but it was right in the middle of a lot of the catastrophe that was going on from Hurricane Helene. And I really tried, as I was reading through this, to try to steelman the other side and try to put myself in their shoes and justify this post, and it was really difficult to do. And I know that they're a little bit edgy on their Instagram profile, but to essentially brag that you didn't have the devastation that other destinations did, that you didn't have the suffering that other destinations did. I had a real problem with it. I agreed with Craig, who posted on his Instagram and had an opinion about it, and I sent it to you because you don't have much of a tender heart or anything like that. So I thought maybe you would be able to find the value in this post.
Well, you made me choke. Yeah, I think what added a little insult to injury with this is that they put emojis afterwards. There's like shrugging emojis and then this swirly emoji, which I guess is meant to emulate a hurricane. And to me, this just, you already said this, right? They're an edgy brand. This is, so people don't know what Glenwood is. It's a district in the city of Raleigh that was, I think in 2022, the city allowed it to become the first social district, meaning people could drink on the streets. They could have open containers on the streets, right? So this is the party area of Raleigh. That's my understanding, at least. I've never been there. Their Instagram is very edgy. I mean, there's people dropping F-bombs. It's hedonism, right? People drinking, having a good time, and acting like lunatics. And so I get the brand, and I get that you want to sort of stay on brand when you're doing stuff, but the timing of this just seems so tone deaf when your neighbors in Asheville and other areas of North Carolina are going through this horrific tragedy, and there's still, people without power, they've lost their homes. I mean, there's so much tragedy to this, and for you to make a joke about it in this way, I get you're excited. Like, I understand that, but there's a better way to do this, and boy, this is a shocker for me. I don't know who's responsible for it. I'm hoping it's not like a quote unquote DMO, but would love to have someone on the show and defend it if they feel like they can. But CA, what's your thoughts on this? This is the first time we've shared this with you. Do you have an initial reaction?
I mean, I totally get I've been in destinations for a long time, and I totally get like, we need to tell people that it's okay here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a lot of the
coast is clear, right? There's a clear message.
You have there's a tragedy, there's a catastrophe that happens, and then a lot of the job is of the destination is then saying, like, it's okay, right? The beaches are okay. I mean, I remember this in Visit Florida with the oil spills, and I've been involved in dozens of these things, so I totally get like the impetus of it. But the question of why no one said, hold on a minute, like, is this the right timing, is really I get why you would have that idea. Why no one stopped it from going live is really kind of the key question. Because if you replace this with a different catastrophe, it gets really dark. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you replace this with, a mass shooting or a fire or right, like there's all these other catastrophes, which is what the hurricane is, right? Like, it's a major catastrophe. Presumably you wouldn't have posted that if it was a different kind of a crisis, because someone would have gone like, ooh, I don't know, man, that's probably not the right time to do that.
Yeah.
No.
And I do think there's a tendency these days to sort of, because the mainstream media has sensationalized the risk of hurricanes for the last several years. And oftentimes, I mean, we've been a recipient of that, where everyone the news media for a week leading up to a hurricane is like, Myrtle Beach is going to be wiped off the face of the planet, and then there's a big nothing burger, and the week afterwards the media is not talking about it. And so we get frustrated as a destination to say, the media, you just cost this community a whole lot of economic value, and now you're not doing anything about it, right? And that happens more frequently than what we saw here. And so I understand people rushing to say the coast is clear, or we're fine here, come visit, come spend your money. But I think what was egregious about this a little more was it sort of had an implied dig at the other places that didn't come out of this scot-free, you know.
Right.
And I think if no one had any damage and everyone had gotten through this, the tone might have felt a little better. But right now, it feels tone deaf when your neighbors are suffering so much. And to put paid media behind that is, I don't know, it adds insult to injury. And we have conversations about that. Like, what do we do with paid media? Do we even want to promote in destinations where they're impacted at all? You know, do we want to go out with a clear message? Obviously, we could benefit financially from folks that were maybe planning to go to Asheville or Greenville or other areas, but we choose not to because it's not appropriate. And so,
well, Stuart, you often refer to the vendor side as the dark side, right? And even though you're the one with the Darth Vader mask behind you, we'll stick with the fact that vendors are on the dark side. So I'm going to take the dark side position here, just so that we can look at the other side. And my question here is, how many people know who Glenwood South District is today versus how many knew before? Even though they exploited a tragedy, and even though they got a ton of backlash, didn't they also get a significant amount of awareness of people who know who that district is that didn't know before because of this social sharing that's happened and the outrage that's happened? Basically, are they going to grow as a result of this? And did they take the unethical dark side approach? And we're going to get into ethics today, so it actually feels like an important component of this to have.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. I mean, they ran an ad that probably drove some interest, certainly drove some chatter. I didn't see the comments because you just sent me a screenshot, but I would have loved to have seen I couldn't find the post earlier because it was a paid post and it's not on their organic feed, but I would love to have seen what the chat was. But there's probably people out there that shared that sentiment, and I doubt that they're struggling in terms of participation. All the videos they're posting, it looks very prominent and well frequented. So you may be right. You know, it may be that we're putting ethics in the way of performance. I'm just personally someone that I don't think the ends justify the means always, you know. And I think you've got to draw an ethical line in marketing. In you know, that's what gets us all in trouble, is when we put ethics to one side. There's a lot we can do to manipulate people, their emotions and their behaviors as marketers that we consciously choose not to do as ethical marketers. And so I think this is a line I personally wouldn't cross, but it seems like some would.
But I think there's also an element of the audience there too. Like I definitely viewed it when you showed it to me through the lens of a destination. But that's thinking about like people from other destinations, right? Like visitors, and that's not necessarily the audience there, right?
Yeah.
Like if it's a party district, it's going to be a lot more locals. You know, maybe it's viewed as more of a local, like, come on out and celebrate kind of a thing, which you can understand.
And the sense of
sort
relief,
of contextually, right? You know, especially as you say, as a promoted post, right? Contextually kind of tone deaf when other communities don't have that.
Yeah. You're exactly right. I mean, it probably worked really well for them, and they probably didn't give it a second thought. I think as DMOs, we have a responsibility to each other, to the community as well, beyond just our own personal community's performance. I think we have to lift the entire industry up together, and I don't think posts like this are particularly helpful. So let's shift gears. I think we did a good job sort of looking at both sides of that, but let's do that with that AI. You know, I think there's a lot of ethical conundrums and quandaries when it comes to AI. I think people talk about the implications related to workforce. You know, does it cost people jobs? I think they look at what is our responsibility in terms of disclosure. What are we able to do in terms of portraying imagery or content that is generated by an AI that maybe isn't 100% truthful. I mean, there's a lot of angles to this and a lot of dimensions to how we have to think about when is it appropriate and how is it appropriate to use AI. But I'm going to, as our guest, CA, I'm going to throw it over to you. Do you think it is ethical to use AI for marketing? And where do you think some of those boundaries or lines are that we shouldn't cross?
That is a great question. This is one of the questions that I, right from the beginning of the AI opener program, was really interested in exploring. And one of the kind of core questions that I tried to frame up around that is at the point where you could generate an image or a video that is of a destination that is indistinguishable from reality, which, we're well on the way to. At that point, is it ethical to use that imagery? Because there's going to be a lot of pressure from stakeholders, right? From the providers of the funds. Like, why would you spend $250,000 doing a video shoot to capture imagery that you could get for 60 cents in an afternoon using an AI tool, right? Like, so there's definitely going to be that monetary pressure. The balance for that is whether or not consumers, and this is really what this comes down to, I think, is whether or not consumers are going to push back or notice when we as destinations use those tools. So that's one of the ethical questions. As you pointed out, there's dozens of them, right? Like, there's an ethical question about whether or not building AI the way it has been built is whether or not it's ethical to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's ingested a bunch of information. It has mapped the vectors between the words and the concepts in there, and then it's able to reproduce information that in some cases looks really, really similar
Mm-hmm.
to what was ingested. So there's tons of questions about whether or not even training it or building it to begin with was ethical. And then that gets right, that goes all the way into all of the other kinds of activities that we do with it. One of the things that I struggle with, and we've talked a lot about this in the AI opener program, especially as it related to disclosure. Okay, like what kinds of things do we need to disclose when we are using AI, like whether it's content or images or something else? And the trouble with that is that we've been manipulating, like, as marketers, as destinations, we've been manipulating photos for decades.
Right.
So if I had to disclose to you that an AI removed a bird from a photo, how come I don't have to disclose that we removed the birds and the dirt from the photo 20 years ago?
Or made the sky bluer or the sea
those lines,
clearer,
I think are really hard to find.
Yeah.
And once you really start, it's easy to say, right? It's easy to say in the beginning, you look at it and you go, well, we need to be ethical with these. We can't use these kinds of things in our marketing. But if you start to unpack that, it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah, and I tend to be someone that's more on the liberal side related to the use of AI than even some of our agencies. I'm pushing some of our agencies to adopt it faster. And we have one where their policy was they wouldn't construct a press release with AI, the initial draft of a press release. And I came back and said, well, why not? What's the difference, right? If there's a human in the loop and you're feeding it the framework and you're at the first pass, and then you look at it as a human and you edit it, and then maybe you pass it through AI again. The outcome is going to be superior, and I don't see a problem. But everyone has to sort of draw their ethical lines. Adam, I'd be curious, have you as an agency with Relic, have you guys given guidelines to your employees about what's appropriate in terms of creating work for your clients?
Yeah, so I see disclosure as a very important component of the agency client relationship, right? Like I think there's much clearer lines as far as ethics go. If I'm charging you the price of a full-time person when I'm helping you with a project as a client, but it takes me now 5% of the time that it took me a year ago to do that, then I'm abusing that relationship. And the lines to me are pretty clear. Now, of course, if we have an outcomes-based relationship and we're still getting the outcomes, and I mean, there's an argument to be made, right? But I would say for the most part, from an ethical perspective, if I start charging you the same amount and I only give you 5% of the output that I gave you before, there's a pretty clear ethical line there. On the other side of that, I'm having a hard time in this conversation seeing the necessity of disclosure from the DMO to the end consumer. Because the reality is, we've been manipulating, I shouldn't say we, destinations have been manipulating reality in their pitch for the visitor to come visit for years and years. And then the visitor shows up and it doesn't match at all what they thought it was going to be. And we didn't need AI for people to misrepresent that experience. And that, what happened is you would lose the relationship with the customer because they would come and the experience didn't match what you demonstrated, right? And so I kind of feel like the same thing applies if you're using AI in a way that correctly represents the destination. I'm having a hard time seeing the downside from an ethical perspective for the visitor.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Do you have any comment to that, CA, before I chime in?
I have all kinds of comments. I mean, the thing that's interesting about this, and just backing up for a second, part of the reason that we have to be so focused on the ethical component here, like why are we talking about this, is because there aren't legal guidelines.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, the legal guidelines that we do have, like copyright as an example, copyright has been stressed to the point of breaking for a very long time, right? Like a lot of the US copyright law is, you know, very old. And so we've been pushing this and pushing this and pushing this, and we're finally to the point where you know, this is going to break those copyright laws. So we don't have laws that we can fall back on. So we have to then, you know, deal with these ethical issues, which we're not as used to dealing with, because we're used to more like, okay, well, you can't capture this kind of data, or you can capture this kind of data when we have the laws that are related. I just, there are certain things that I think we could all agree on, that we could say, like, if we're using AI to post a bunch of fake comments to try to manipulate someone's perception of the destination, then we could all point to that and go, "Ooh, that was unethical. You probably shouldn't do that." But there's so much gray area that on the other side of that, it's murky.
And did you guys see that legislation that came through in the US this past week about banning fake reviews? Like, it's now illegal to post a fake review. It's now illegal for you to post fake testimonials or AI generated stuff. And so there's going to be consequences for that. And that fixes a few problems. Now, there's going to be unintended consequences to that. So I think we're going to see this piecemeal legislation that comes out that restricts and probably forces disclosure. And we also see that the social platforms are already voluntarily forcing disclosure, right? If you're uploading image to Facebook or something like that, they're encouraging folks to say this was using AI. But I want to go back to what Adam was talking about in terms of, we've been manipulating people for years. I mean, marketers, at the end of the day, our job is to promote whatever the product is we're selling, whether it's a destination or whatever. And we've always been encouraged to sell the most aggressive version of the truth, right? That whatever it is we're selling, we're going to put the lipstick on the pig and paint the brightest, rosiest version of that we can. That's what we've done. But I think sophisticated marketers have learned over the years that while you can have short-term success being dishonest and deceitful with what you represent, long-term, you're never going to win, right? So I think any destination marketer has to be in it for the long term, for the destination, for the reputation of the destination. And we know that things like word of mouth are still one of the most powerful tools we have. And so if we consistently manipulate people into believing something that's not true about our destination, or even exaggerating what's true about our destination, and they come and the experience doesn't match the expectation, long term, that's going to have a negative effect that is going to make our job a lot harder. So I don't know that it's an ethical question. I think it's just an intellectual question, is how far do I want to push this? Because at the end of the day, what we're showing people is a facsimile of reality, no matter what the medium is, right? If we take a photograph on film, like, we're not showing the destination, it's a representation. If we're creating a digital image, it's pixels on a computer, right? It's not really the destination. And we've chosen as an industry and as marketers and destinations to already manipulate that, to, like I said, make the sky or the ocean a little more blue, or take bird out but so already doing that. But I think it's the intent behind that makes a difference. Like if I do a photo shoot and I spent $200,000 and there are a few clouds in the sky that day, yeah, I don't feel bad. I don't think that's an ethical problem to take some of the clouds out and make it look a little warmer and sunnier that day. But where I think we need to draw the line is when we're being dishonest to the point of manipulating people into believing something that's not true. And so that's ethically where we draw the line here.
Stuart, I have one problem with your kind of definition of that, and that's I like to play basketball, and one thing that just absolutely drives me crazy is there's a penalty in basketball where if you kick the ball, it's called a kickball, and the play stops. It's a turnover. But there's some people that make the argument, well, you have to intend to kick it. And then the onus is entirely on the person who kicked the ball to tell you whether or not they actually intended to kick the ball. And there's no way you can have a subjective question of intent to decide a play in basketball. And I think the same thing goes for marketing. We all have different moral frameworks. We all have different boundaries that we work within. And if the onus is on you to decide, like, your ethical comfort level is what decides what you can and can't do, that means everybody's going to be violating everyone else's boundaries. And I don't know that that's the answer. And so, like, I don't know. I struggle with kind of the guardrails that you're setting there.
Yeah, well, they're abused constantly, right? These are the guardrails that sort of exist today, as everyone's free to make the decision on their own. This is why we have can spam in other laws about how we email, right? This is why we have privacy laws that have come in about how we handle private data, PII and such, is because a few bad actors have chosen to stretch their ethical limits and say, hey, if it's good for me, it's good for everyone, right? And so I think we all each have to make those individual choices on everything, every part of marketing that we're doing. And I think it especially is complicated today because AI gives us superhuman power, right? We can do a lot more than we could 2 years ago because of AI. And so the ability to do good is greatly increased, but the ability to do evil is greatly increased as well. But I'm not for mandates, right? I don't think mandates are the solution. Go ahead, CA.
Well, and the examples that you've used there are, can spam and data privacy and stuff are all sort of flawed approaches to how we control the data, because that's the only thing that you really can do is sort of a flawed approach to it, particularly when you're talking about octogenarian legislatures that are making decisions about this sort of stuff. But I think you've hinted at where what will ultimately be the line here is that each of us has our own kind of ethical boundaries about what, how much we're willing to stretch or promote the truth. But you've already hinted at that what will really decide that is the consumer, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not it's acceptable for us to use an image that is AI generated to promote a destination is really down to how that is being perceived by the visitor, and whether or not they view that as a violation of the sort of trust or authenticity. I mean, the issue that we have on our end of things, like the creators or the drivers of these kinds of imagery and creative, it's all manipulated anyway. Okay, like you were talking about the photo shoot and you remove the clouds, fine, but you hired talent and you dressed them up in a particular way and you told them to act in a particular way. I mean, none of that is real. Right? Like we can pretend that that's an authentic picture of what the destination looks like, but that wasn't authentic. You didn't just stumble across those people on the beach.
These beautiful people. Yeah. We've actually started trying, we've got an experiment that we're about to start running where, we run several campaigns of TV commercial at a time. And some of them are more like traditional DMO commercials. Some of them are a little more avant-garde. And one of the things we've been testing a little bit over the last couple of years is showing real people having real experiences may actually, even though like it's not as glossy or rosy, it may actually appeal more to their peers and have a more of a emotional connection with people when they see people that look like themselves and not just curated people that look like themselves, but real
Yeah.
people that look like themselves. So we have a whole set of 30
Stuart,
second and
I'm trying to imagine the flyers that you put out. Like, is it ugly people auditions? What's the how do
no,
you
so
type that?
we're fortunate. So we created this series of commercials using user generated content that we already have. So we use a platform called flip.to, and it does a few different things for us. But one of its solutions is an advocacy platform. So when someone comes and stays in Myrtle Beach, we can trigger an email to them post stay that says, "How was your stay?" and leave a memory, leave us a photo and a quote of a story of what your stay was. And so we've collected tens of thousands of these over the last 10 years. And so we just have this massive database of real authentic photos that people have given us full permission to use, and an insight into what they love about Myrtle Beach. And so we took the photos. We did get voice actors to narrate their stories because it's just text, but we're using real people's stories and what they love about Myrtle Beach to tell the story. Because we've always said, we're not the heroes of the story. I'm beginning to wonder if we're even the guides for the story. I think we're maybe like Sarah Peter said a couple of weeks ago, maybe we're just the incubator for the story. And I sort of like that analogy. But can we make a bigger difference by telling authentic stories through the voice of the consumer? That's something we're experimenting with. So let's shift gears a little bit. You've been working in AI. I'd argue you're probably one of the forward most thinking folks in our industry, along with Jeanette Rausch at New York City. But you've been doing these AI openers with a ton of DMOs. So you probably have more conversations with DMOs about AI than anyone else in this industry at this point. What are some of the through lines or the questions that people are asking that you're getting on a frequent basis where there's concerns about how to use AI? And as a follow-up, where do you think how much are DMOs embracing AI at this point in your mind?
I'll answer that one first. I think it is, for the most part, as an industry, I think it is tentative. I think I think most destinations are still in the experimenting or understanding kind of a phase. I think there are very few that are really at the scaling kind of phase in their own organizations. I think a lot of the engagements, and understandably, okay, like the way destinations are funded and managed is complicated. You got a lot of stakeholders, right? You got a lot of people asking questions about what you're doing. You get a lot of exposure for making those decisions and what they look like.
Yeah, we had a whole episode a couple of weeks ago with Will Seckham talking about why DMOs don't take risks. So we certainly understand. We understand why.
There's a lot of reasons not to,
Yeah.
to take risks. So I mean, I would say in general, as an industry, where destinations are still trying to figure out how to use them, I think the questions are a lot more like some of the stuff that you've already brought up, right? Like, is it like the press release is a great example, right? Is it okay for me to use? And that's some of what I get internally too. Like, is it okay for me to use this? Should I be using this? It kind of feels like cheating. And I mean, like you, Stuart, I have probably a much more kind of open attitude about this than maybe other people do. Like, to me, if you produce a press release, if I've hired you to give me a press release and you produce a terrible press release, do I care whether you used Microsoft Word to do that or something else? I don't.
Right. Yeah.
So
Did you
do I
use spell
care
check,
if
or
you
did you know
use
how to spell all those
Chat
words? Right. I mean,
GPT
same thing.
to do it? Like, I care about the output.
Yeah.
I don't care
Yeah.
about the methodology, about how you got to the output. So
Right.
I think there's a big barrier. I think there's an initial barrier there that has to get over is it okay to use this? How do I use this? Because that's how we get to the gains on the other side of this. And so there's a deck that I talk about that has this sort of mountain in it, and the peak of the mountain is AI literacy. And this is really more for organizations. Like, how does an organization, enable how does it get to things like efficiency and productivity and product, innovation? And you have to have literacy. You have to have enough people in your organization that have that real and recent experience with the tools to be able to get to those on the other side. And you have to have governance and enablement and a bunch of other things to get to that point. But that we're still on that, as an industry, we're still on the front side of that. We're still on the like governance side, the enablement, even the like, is it even okay for me to do this, before we can get to that like pervasive literacy, where then we can go, okay, there's a whole bunch of different ways that we could be using this to do more interesting things for our visitors, right? And for ourselves. And Adam, earlier you were saying that, is it ethical to spend 5% of the time and charge for 100% of the time?
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you're going back to that.
Certainly not. And we can agree that isn't that isn't ethical, but let's also, like, this is supposed to be a no bullshit sort of a podcast. Okay. Like the agency business functions on, doing the work in less time than what you bid it for. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and I get it. Like, I'm with you on the, do I feel good about spending 5% of the time and charging for 100%? I would not. But I also will tell you that's not what I've observed, especially with AI technology. What I observe with AI technology is that the hours that we're spending, we're spending the same number of hours, but we're doing more with the hours that we do have, which then goes back to this sort of ethical question of, is that okay?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
then is it abuse the other way, where we're doing so much more for essentially what comes out to less?
That's
right?
a whole other question.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna take an opposite opinion to you guys, and it's weird, right? Because you're the dark side vendors, and I'm on the other. I think, for me as a DMO, I don't like being billed for time. I like being billed for value, right? I like the value to be what I'm paying for. I like to say, I want this thing and I'll pay X for it. And so I personally, and I'm not saying, because both of you are vendors of mine, I'm not saying jack your rates on us or anything like that, or you can work less hours on us, because
let me write that down.
I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. But
this is recording, right?
yeah, it's not a legal contract by any means. But I think one of the mistakes that agencies make is get caught up in this hourly billing cycle. And I've been on the other side of that, right? And I saw manipulation of that, where junior level people or folks in the agency were just padding time because that's what was billed. And at the end of the day, it didn't add value. So I think agencies need to stop worrying about time and focusing on value. Now, basic economics is going to, and free market solutions is going to sort things out, right? They always say that my opportunity is in your margin. And so if you start charging a lot of money for 5 minutes of work where it used to take you 10 hours, then someone's going to come in and replace you and be able to do that more economically, and the price is going to come down. So there's a balance, right? But I don't think, I don't care how much time you spend on it, as long as I'm getting the value of it. And actually, I'd prefer someone that is more efficient at doing something, because I know I'd have confidence they're more skillful. And so if you put like an A-list designer on designing me a logo, they're probably going to spend half the time but have much better product than if you put a junior designer on it. They're going to spend twice as long. I don't want to pay for that time if the product's not as good, So I think agencies in general need to get away from this time billing nonsense.
Well, I don't want to turn this into like an entire episode about the flaws in the agency business model, because
let's do that another episode.
We would need a lot more time to discuss all the flaws in the model. But here's the problem with what you're saying, Stuart. I love the ideal of what you're saying, but when I'm one of 9 agencies, you work with 9 different agencies, right? If I'm one of 9 of them, and it's the combined output that decides the value that these 9 agencies are bringing, and you say, well, Adam, I want you to prove the value. What's the metric that you're going to ask for in order to prove that you got the value that you paid for? Even if you may be more sophisticated as a client, 99% of the clients are going to say, send me an hour's breakdown then for that retainer.
Yeah. I get it. I'm not saying that it's easy to solve the problem. I just think it's flawed as it is. This show is all about us pointing out problems. I don't know that we provide a lot of solutions to folks, but I think it's worth a deeper. I'm joking, of course. I think there's lots of solutions here, But I think it's worth a deeper conversation. And at the end of the day, I think especially if it's project work and you're delivering me this finite widget, whatever it is, it doesn't matter how much time you spend, as long as I know what that is in terms of value to my community, and I'm getting an ROI from the investment I'm making from the taxpayers' dollars.
It's
Let's
easier to
shift
come
back.
to if
I think we could go down this
it's
rabbit hole
simplistic.
for several times.
I
So
can't get out of this loop.
I know all you're saying is, oh, Stuart just said I can charge him more.
I
That is
think
not what I
CA
said.
wants to jump in here, though. Go ahead, CA.
So
ahead,
I had
CA.
something written down that I was, hopefully it's all right if I sort of change the gears here. I would love to continue to talk about the agency part, but it does
Is it
feel
a
like a
sonnet
different
or,
episode.
or a limerick, or what did you write down?
No, I
Is this
wish it was.
poetry?
I could have an
Okay.
AI write that. So when we were
Yeah.
talking
We'll take a
about
haiku.
representation earlier, that made me think of, so early in the AI opener sessions in 2024, we had a presenter on that was part of the European cohort who had a virtual influencer. And it was a completely, fictitious person in all respects, right? The photos were fake, the story was fake, the name, all of the thing was fake. And when it was on the list, right, when it was on the agenda, I was like, nah, this is going to be terrible, right? Like this is silly or creepy or something, right? And I went into listening to that session just expecting to just be sort of like turned off by the whole thing. And honestly, as he began to talk about the way that it was set up and what it meant and how people were interacting with it, I started to go, oh, maybe there is something there, right? And he talks a little bit about like, what is the difference between the gecko Geico or the Geico gecko and a pretend person who is influencing you like a personality. And that got me thinking in a little bit different ways. Like, okay, yeah, actually, there maybe is something interesting there. Now, fast forward to today, and this has actually been true for many quarters, but the second most used AI tool globally, right after ChatGPT, is character.ai. And if you haven't used character.ai, it is just literally like pre-primed chatbots that are built with characters, attributes. So you can have a conversation with SpongeBob about Bikini Bottom. Like it accomplishes nothing as far as like, enterprise work or anything like that. This is the second most popular platform for AI, is people
So it's
talking
entertainment
to,
versus
Well,
utility.
to characters. So now
But-
tell me that a virtual influencer doesn't do anything, right? Like now you fast forward to that and you go, holy shit, this is people who are literally spending their time talking to characters from, like Elsa from Frozen. You want to talk to her, then you can talk to, like, it's insane.
Well, there is a major ethical issue with character AI. I actually saw a news story today that there was a teenage boy that was chatting with Daenerys Targaryen, right? The character from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And he actually confessed that he had some self-harm thoughts and tendencies. And Daenerys actually encouraged him to end his life, and he did.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
boy.
so there's a major issue there. And I guess that's where we may have to, through trial and error, figure out where these ethical guardrails are, because I think we can all agree that's awful, that's terrible, that should never happen. I also couldn't have dreamed that an AI would encourage a young man to do that. And so I think there might be, I don't know, there might be a lot more to come that we're going to discover about what these guardrails need to be.
Yeah, and I think
mean,
there's the human side of ethics, right? And what does AI do to humanity and society? I think we've got to look hard at that. But I think what CA brings up is a really interesting insight about the utilization of AI. And so something like character.ai is pure entertainment. It's not utility, right? And I think the same with this virtual influencer or content creator in your market. And they're not the first to do that, right? Lil Miquela's been out for probably, way before AI was. It was I think they're in LA. It was disclosed. It was a video game company or a 3D animation company that created Lil Miquela on Instagram and TikTok. I think it's just Instagram initially. It may be on TikTok now, but they disclosed it up front. They said, hey, we are the first ever virtual influencer. And she got so much notoriety. And I say she, like she's a person, right? She got so much press and coverage that she has millions and millions of followers on social media. But I think the difference is that social contract is written, right? So when you're dealing with the Geico Gecko, when you're dealing with a mascot of some kind, there's a social contract between you and the consumer. We all understand this is play, this is make believe. And so I think if you're going to go to that extent where you create someone that isn't real, to me, that's something you should disclose to the consumer,
Totally.
because otherwise you're totally manipulating people. But then
Yeah.
part of me now is wondering, well, when we cast someone in a TV commercial or photo shoot, it's not much different, right? It's a fake person, a fake persona. But to me, I don't think we would push out a virtual person without disclosing that or letting the consumer in on the situation.
And to be fair, that was part of the session in March. The guy that was presenting it, that was one of his principles, was that you had to say up front, because it didn't work otherwise. Yeah. Right. And confusingly, like, you think that saying that would then make people go, oh, I don't care about this. And he was trying to say that it was actually the opposite, is that once you knew up front what it was, and then you bought into that, then everything that followed was fine. And if it was the reverse, where you thought it was something real and then you found out it wasn't, then you've broken that trust. And
well, you're part of a game at that point. Humans, I mean, we grew up playing games. Fun is a massive driver for us, and we see with character AI that's manifesting in the data, right? That people want to be entertained. And if you're in on a game, like, hey, this is a fake person, follow along what they do, then that's entertaining to people. They're gonna gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
And if that's where destination is all about being where the audience is. There's an audience on character AI. Does that mean that a destination needs to have a persona that is part of that?
Yeah, Aunt Myrtle's coming to destination to character AI. Maybe so. I don't know. We can't be everywhere. I've always been a believer of, you do the channels you're in really well, and if you can't be present, you shouldn't have a presence. So I don't think we're going to have a character AI model anytime soon.
You say that now.
Yeah.
I mean,
who do you think is going to be coming?
There could
up
be a
with
future
Stu's
episode of this where we're talking about it. But.
Yeah, I mean, I fully reserve the right to change my mind in the next 3 hours, but maybe by the time this episode comes out, I will have a character AI.
Yeah, maybe you'll already be on there.
I'm going to build one to do Stu's News every week.
There you go.
They do better than I do, for sure. Well, CA, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I appreciate you coming on and really digging into the weeds on this. You're welcome to come back anytime if you have other niches you want to, nooks and crannies you'd like to go into related to AI or anything in the industry. And same to anyone else at Miles Agency or anyone else watching, listening to this. We'd love to have you on the show. We want to get diverse voices with diverse opinions. We want to agree, we want to disagree, we want to laugh, we want to cry, we want to shake our fists and at each other and have all the emotions, because this is the conversation that this industry needs. We believe this is a love letter to the industry. It is part of therapy session to us, hopefully partly user manual for the industry too. But we're going to keep having these discussions as long as people keep watching and listening. And so be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a review and subscribe if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're consuming this. And then send us your feedback. You can find me on LinkedIn at Stuart Butler. You can find Adam. Where can they find you?
LinkedIn, Adam Stoker, and then Adam at relicagency.com.
And then CA, if someone wants to get hold of you or learn more about what you and the Miles team are doing, where can they find you?
You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm ca.clark@milespartnership.com. And since you gave me the opening, I'll also plug our AI opener program for 2025 is coming up. So if you're interested, if you're a destination and you're interested in talking about AI, that's basically what we do. So check out
it's great. And I don't usually plug things on this show, but I'll say we've been a participant. I haven't been able to make every meeting, but I will say everyone I've been to has been valuable to me. We've heard ideas from other DMOs and other vendors in the market. You've posed really tough questions for us to think about, and you've also set some really cool homework assignments. And we started using some fun audio AI tools because you'd share them with us. So I think there's a lot of value.
That's how you need to do Stu's News jingle right there.
Well, so that's what Adam's done. It's just there's no support from the community.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. It's really good, CA.
I can't wait to hear it.
Well, guys,
thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we love to have you. We'd love to continue the conversation. And guys, Tune in every Thursday. We're going to be dropping new episodes. And until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.